Welcome to Running Back Rankings Chat for Underdog. Matt and I are going to be taking a look at Matt's running back rankings for Underdog contests, and we're going to be comparing them to the current ADP in Underdog drafts. Some pretty drastic differences. We did a show last week. Matt and I started doing this show last week, not really knowing how many positions we were going to get done, how long it was going to take per position. We ended up only covering quarterbacks on that show because we had so much to talk about. I think we're going to have a similar amount to talk about today with running backs. I'm really looking forward to it because Matt has some rankings that are drastically different from ADP, which is always fun to see when you can really discuss where you are different. But while you're coming in, please do give us a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, hit that notification button so you can get alerts when our shows go live. I'm Neil Orfield. You can find me on Twitter at PlayerQDFS. I'm here with Matt Gajewski. You can find him on Twitter at Matt_Gajewski. And, subscribe to the channel, of course, if you haven't already, because we have a lot of good content going out all the time. Matt, are you looking forward to the show as much as I am?
Yeah, man. Last week was a blast. Learned a lot. It's always good to talk to smart people in the industry, help form opinions, solidify opinions, make changes where necessary. So I'm hoping we have a lot of the same for the running back chat. I'm excited.
Yeah, there's only like one or two where I'm like, okay, I'm drastically different from you, and I really want to talk it over with you. I feel like for the most part, a lot of places where you are ahead of ADP, I am also. Like we're on a lot of the same running backs, but it is pretty disconcerting for me when I see some of the running backs that I've drafted the most of. I'm seeing that you're like way behind ADP, and then a couple that you are well ahead of ADP that I have been largely fading. So it'll be fun to talk about. Always good to have these discussions. I know last week you actually, I think, pushed me more onto some players some quarterbacks that I was already sort of on, and kind of pushed me away from some. But I think running backs, it'll be an interesting discussion figuring out who you like relative to the field. And I should mention, guys, that if you have not yet signed up for Underdog, you can do so using the link in the description of this video. You're going to get your deposit matched up to $100 on Underdog. And I believe we now have an offer where you also get a free month of Stochastic Plus Platinum when you sign up for Underdog. I think you're going to have to email us. Let me read the details of that. But I believe you also are going to get a free month of Stochastic Plus Platinum along with your first deposit match bonus, which is a phenomenal deal. Most places you just get that deposit match. With this free month of Stochastic Plus Platinum, best DFS tools in the industry, plenty of great tools on the Stochastic site. So check it out if you haven't already. Use the link in the description. I'll get you the details on how to take advantage of that Stochastic offer as well while we go. Matt, I'm going to throw up on the screen. No, that didn't. I worded that weirdly. I'm going to put on the screen your rankings. We're going to be taking a look at how they compare to the running back rankings, the ADPs currently on Underdog, and just get a head start on. And I'm actually going to throw up my spreadsheet as well on there so that we can see the places where we have the biggest difference here. So I'm going to put that on the screen now. All right, so here's Matt's rankings currently, which you can find on the Stochastic page, on the NFL page on Stochastic. Actually, let me show you. If you just go to NFL best ball rankings, you're going to find this, and it's going to be, I think it's $40 for these rankings for the entire season. For the entire our best ball package comes with these rankings, which you have the CSV export here that you can import directly onto Underdog. Very cool. But I'm actually going to show the differences between your rankings and the Underdog ADPs. So I think this is the easiest way to kind of visualize some of the differences. And there are some that I'm still adding to here. But at the top, just looking at the big flip you have here is you have Bijan Robinson as the RB2, Austin Eckler as the RB3. That is different from ADP. So you're drafting Bijan Robinson. You have ranked 6th overall. His ADP is at 10. You have Austin Eckler ranked 9th overall. His ADP is at 7.5. So why do you think that you like Bijan Robinson better than the field? We'll start there.
This is just projection. They're very close, like on DraftKings and drafters. Eckler's ahead and Bijan's ahead here. So there's not really too much to discuss. It just comes down to PPR formatting versus standard formatting. To dive into it just briefly, again, there's not too much to discuss. Bijan's expected to have a monstrous workload where he got drafted for the run heaviest team in the NFL. So efficiency doesn't really matter too much. Even though we are expecting some improvement from Atlanta, I don't think they're going to be like a top half of the league team or anything like that. But this is just a projection difference.
Okay. And do you think that you would actually draft, like if those two are both on the board at, you have the eighth pick, would you draft Bijan ahead of Eckler there? Or do you think that you would follow ADP and, try to get kind of even exposure to both?
I think it depends on your platform. I have no issue there. What I would try to do is get even exposure to both, but you see a lot of variance draft to draft. I have seen Bijan go ahead of Eckler a bunch of times, and I've seen it vice versa. So I don't really think this is too big of a talking point.
Okay. So, I mean, yeah, I guess I mean for Underdog specifically. So
Yeah, if you're doing one draft, I would draft Bijan ahead.
okay, but not always.
No, I mean,
Okay.
well, I mean, you don't have to either. You're playing multiple drafts. You're going to have somewhere Bijan goes ahead of Eckler. You're going to have somewhere Eckler goes ahead of Bijan. That's not like the locked in top three we see, at the top of drafts.
Sure. Okay. So it's you're gonna let the draft fall as it may for you. All
And
right.
end of story. There, we're talking about like razor thin margin in projection here between these two.
Okay. So not
I
not
mean,
a
if
huge.
you're even in the audience and you have a different take, like I probably wouldn't even argue with you.
Okay. So you don't feel strongly about this one. All right. So
No,
we
I can tell you what their projections are specifically. They're like,
I can show you. It's right here on the site.
yeah,
You've got Bijan at 267, Eckler at 254. So yeah, those are pretty thin. Even more razor thin between Eckler and Nick Chubb and beyond. There's a little bit of a gap, but yeah, obviously 13 points over the course of a season. Not a huge gap there.
yeah, very very close.
But then yeah, very even closer as you get further after Bijan, really close between this group from Derrick Henry up to Eckler, 5-point spread. But all right, let's keep moving down. So Josh Jacobs, the first really big stand you have here. You have Josh Jacobs as your RB5. He's going as the RB10. You have him ranked 16th overall. He's going an ADP of 28. What do you think accounts for your love for Josh Jacobs relative to the field?
I'm actually a little surprised by this one because a lot of people in the industry are ahead of ADP. We're not unique in this stance. And I think there might just be a little bit of fear that Jacobs might hold out.
Yep.
I think if we've learned anything from the past, it's running backs generally holding out's not a good idea. You can reference Melvin Gordon and how he tanked his career by his holdout. So I'm not really expecting Jacobs or Saquon Barkley to hold out. I think they'll probably take an extension if they're offered one. Otherwise, play on the franchise tag. You just can't sit out games at the running back position and forego those paychecks. So I don't think we're going to see a holdout from either one. I could be wrong here. But to speak to Jacobs, he has arguably the best role in the NFL outside those big three backs up at the top. Offense isn't going to be great. We think Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be ready for the season. We're not sure. But we've now seen Jacobs handle a 3-down workload. We've seen him handle pass catching work. He can do it all. We're just hoping he doesn't hold out.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah, I mean, I think that you are absolutely right that it is just a little bit of worry that he's going to hold out or something. But yeah, I think that I've been drafting a ton of Josh Jacobs. Definitely somebody that I'm with you on the Jacobs love. I've been drafting a ton of him. Guys, I just reread the instructions for the Underdog deal. If you want to take advantage of the Stochastic Plus Platinum, yeah, they're going to send us your username after you sign up using the link in the description, and then we will send you an email so you can take advantage of that free month of Stochastic Plus Platinum. So yeah, it's a fantastic deal. I mean, basically everywhere you can find the first deposit match up to $100. Nowhere else are you going to get the free month of Stochastic Plus Platinum on top of it. So if you haven't yet signed up for Underdog, honestly, I think you should do so right away because it is a fantastic deal. I've been drafting on Underdog all summer. I absolutely love it. I'm going to continue drafting there until I have maxed out Best Ball Mania, probably the weekly winners contest as well. They have a lot of cool contests over on Underdog. Check it out if you haven't already. All right. So next up, and I'm starting, if you haven't noticed, I'm starting with some running backs that you are ahead of ADP. Then we're going to discuss some running backs where you are behind ADP as well. But you have Derrick Henry as your RB8. The field also has him as RB8. And I should say I made this list last week before that show. And some of these you've actually become, you and the field have come a lot closer. Like the gap has closed a bit. So here, the gap doesn't look as big as it looked last week. And it wasn't a particularly huge gap last week either. But is there any, I mean, you're both drafting Derrick Henry as the RB8. You're taking him 20th overall, the field 24th overall. Is this even a talking point, or should we move on to some more interesting running backs?
I think we should move on to some more interesting running backs. I did a projection update for changes in win totals. So there was a little bit of movement here at the top. That's why it must have been something with Tennessee's win total, or maybe one of the other running backs near him's win total that either increased or decreased his projection. Not sure.
Yeah. And in a lot of places, the field actually just moved closer to where you were as well. So I think you kind of were ahead of the field in some of these spots as well. And now they just doesn't look as drastic as it did a week ago. Joe Mixon, you have as the RB13. The field has as the RB15. You have 40th overall. The field 48.5. Here it has, I believe the gap has closed a little bit, but still a little bit more of a gap there. What do you think the reason is that you're liking Joe Mixon better than the field?
Yeah, this gap has closed. So I'm happy to have been aggressive on Joe Mixon early in the offseason. I think there's just some worry after he was a little bit underwhelming efficiency wise last year. But at the end of the day, this is an explosive offense with Joe Burrow. I mean, you're seeing T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, rightfully so for Jamar Chase, going off the board absurdly high. You're seeing even guys like Tyler Boyd and Irv Smith come off the board at pretty decent prices too. It's going to be one of the highest scoring offenses in the NFL, and you have no competition behind him. We've seen some hype on Trevion Williams, who I believe is in his fourth year out of Texas A&M. Good back there, but has never been able to carve out a role in the NFL. And outside of that, we're looking at a fifth-round rookie in Chase Brown. So essentially no competition here for Mixon. Always the chance they could sign someone, but that hasn't really been rumored too much at this point. As it stands right now, he's in line for 300 touches. And you can't say that about a lot of the running backs going after him. And you can also poke some holes in running backs going ahead of him that don't quite have that same workload. So we'll continue to be aggressive on Mixon.
So what I'm hearing is that my Chase Brown picks, which I was doing a ton of about a month ago, I was drafting Chase Brown everywhere I could. Do you think those are dead picks at this point? Like I was kind of drafting him thinking this looks like he's going to be the guy if Joe Mixon doesn't play. I thought Joe Mixon might get cut or suspended or something. At this point, that looks much less likely than it did a month ago. And it sounds like Trevion Williams. You think Trevion Williams would be the RB2 here? Would he be the handcuff to Mixon?
I don't know that that's clear. We've heard
Okay.
some beat reporters suggest that, but that seems like it'll be a camp battle. I mean, he has like a 3-year leg up on Chase Brown, but I do think Chase Brown's more talented, so I expect that to be decided in training camp. As for your picks on Chase Brown, I mean, he couldn't have been expensive. I see him going like the 18th round, so definitely not dead. Like you're kind of betting on a Joe Mixon injury anyway, so definitely not dead.
Yeah, I mean, I was betting on a Joe Mixon injury or just like Joe Mixon being cut, which there were rumors that Joe Mixon at that point there were rumors that Joe Mixon was gonna be cut. So I was kind of like, all right, I should get ahead of this if that's gonna happen. And now I think that part is dead. So now it's really just a bet on injury, most likely. All right. Next up, we have Alexander Madison. Here we do still have that bigger gap. You have Alexander Madison as your RB14. The field has him as the RB19. You have him ranked 42nd overall, where the field has him at 59th overall. Explain your Madison love here.
Yeah, this is one that's been continually rising. We do a risers fallers column on Monday every single week. A lot of times Alexander Madison just misses that cutoff, but he's been a guy that's been rising consistently over the last 3 weeks or so. I think that makes sense after we saw Dalvin Cook, which we anticipated getting cut. Now, with Madison, people still aren't pricing him in his true role. And I think there's one of 3 options that could happen here. First of all, people are either just discounting Madison too much. Like when you do the projections and you give him a full workload here, you're just too low. You might think one of the running backs behind him is some stud. I personally do not think so. We're talking about 7th round rookies, players like Ty Chandler, Dwayne McBride, Kene Nwangwu. None of these players have ever produced at a high level. And a lot of them are coming out of colleges that are small on day 3 picks. The other option is that Minnesota signs somebody. I think this is in the cards, but they just re-signed Alexander Madison and gave him a raise in terms of his salary. So maybe not as likely as people think here. Overall, there's just some disconnect. And, I understand the concerns if you think they signed somebody, but that's appearing less and less likely as we move forward through training camp. I think it might take like a camp injury to Madison or something for him to get some competition here. And if that's the case, he's just flat out priced too low across the industry. Projection wise, like do the projections, you'll get the same answer.
Interesting. So I feel like there might be some anchoring because early on you could get Alexander Madison at pick like
that
95.
could be, yeah.
Which was always like sort of strange to me the way he was anchored at that price or the way his ranking came up after Dalvin Cook was released, even though I think we knew all along that Dalvin Cook was going to be released. So it's kind of funny to see the way he jumped in the rankings at that point. But I kind of think it might be just like people are slow to really want to raise him up, especially after you were able to draft him so late early on. But yeah, this is a pretty big gap there. So I've been drafting Madison pretty aggressively more recently after seeing your ranking on him, because I don't do my own projections, so I'm kind of relying on your projections a little bit, and I've been getting more aggressive on taking Madison because he does. I mean, that's pretty juicy. I love that gap of you having him ranked 42nd, the field having him at 59th, and you're right. He's a pretty clear RB1. Probably, and I like, Dwayne McBride, I think, is another fine 18th round pick. But Madison
he might
seems.
get cut too. Like,
Oh, you
we're
think
going to
so?
learn so much. Well, I mean, they're going to keep 3. You have Nwangwu, who's a special teamer, and then it's kind of between Ty Chandler and Dwayne McBride. They're not going to keep 4.
Interesting. Yeah. So at that point, if Dwayne
someone's
McBride,
probably getting cut.
if somebody gets cut of Dwayne, it would probably be. It sounds like Dwayne McBride or Ty Chandler, because they want Nwangwu for special teams. Would you like the alternative of those two? If say Dwayne McBride gets cut, are you going to like Ty Chandler much more significantly? Like, would you take him at like a 16th round pick, or vice versa?
Yeah, for sure. And again, I don't know who it's going to be. And I think they're both bad players, but at the end of the day, we want volume. That's all that matters. Like, bad players get volume and have good fantasy scores all the time. So it's really hard to say. Like, you could dive into their profiles. Dwayne McBride played at UAB. All they did was run the ball. There were a couple seasons in college where he didn't even have a catch. And then you look at Ty Chandler. He started his career at Tennessee, had to transfer to North Carolina. He's a career underachiever as well. So, I mean, we're not talking about any sort of high profile players behind him, which is why, again, you should be confident in Madison holding this job.
Yeah, for sure. I don't love hearing you talk about how none of the Vikings backup running backs have any talent. Again, you're a Packers fan, so I'm going to take it with a grain of salt.
I'm a Bears fan.
Oh, I always forget that, because you live in Wisconsin, right?
Yeah.
Where do you live in Wisconsin? Do you live in
Milwaukee?
Yeah. So I think of you as being a Packers fan, but you're right. Well, either way, I mean, you just have an anti-Vikings bias. I think
I love Madison.
All right. Next up, we have. I mean, I'm just trying to make myself feel better that you don't like a lot of my Vikings players. Next up, we have Aaron Jones of Not Matt's Packers. You have him ranked as the RB15. Field has drafted him as the RB17. You have Jones 44th overall. The field has him 54th overall. Why do you love Aaron Jones so much?
This is a player I've honestly considered dropping, so I'd love to hear your take on Aaron Jones too. We've seen A.J. Dillon not quite live up to expectations in Green Bay. And Aaron Jones handles most of the high-value touches with the exception of some goal line work, but really most of that pass game work comes down to Aaron Jones. And once you get past Madison, you're kind of – there's like a tier break. We're out of that workhorse range. Everyone behind him is in a timeshare to some degree. In the rankings right now, it's Kenneth Walker, who's now going to be battling with Zach Charbonnet, Travis Etienne with Tank Bigsby, Jahmyr Gibbs is David Montgomery. So there's like a hole you can poke in all of these guys. And I think it really comes down to preference. When you look at the body of work for all of the players I just named, Jones has the longest history of success. And I think we can bank on his role more than anybody else's in this range. So it's just enough to like break a tie for me between these guys in this tier. But I wouldn't say this is one I feel super strongly about.
Yeah, I really struggle with Aaron Jones for the reasons you listed, being all the pros. But then I'm like, I don't really know what to expect from this Packers offense in general. Like, without Aaron Rodgers, we just haven't really seen it. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to. If Jordan Love is going to be a capable NFL quarterback, if he's really going to be able to like lead this team to some wins, a lot of touchdowns. I really don't know what to do with the Packers offense in general. I feel like for the most part, I have been like underweight to the Packers offense. Aaron Jones actually, I think, has been the one exception, just because I think he goes at like a reasonable price at, an ADP of 54. But yeah, I don't have any strong take here on Aaron Jones. I think that he's going about where he should be going. I think that, obviously a lot of us don't really know what to expect from this Packers offense. And I think that this is kind of like a median outcome for Aaron Jones. There's certainly upside here because of that volume that he has. If the Packers offense can score some touchdowns this year, I think there's also a lot of downside on basically all of the Packers, just because I don't know what to make of Jordan Love. And I know we talked about Jordan Love a little bit last week from a fantasy perspective. I don't remember exactly your take on Jordan Love. Do you think he's going to be successful this year?
I like him for an upside perspective because he can run. So
Sure.
I think, where you get him specifically in drafts, he goes so late that you're kind of playing with house money towards the ceiling of Love if he actually does run based on his athleticism. He ran like a 4.55 at the combine. But as far as him orchestrating an offense, I think it remains to be seen. His efficiency numbers are decent, but we're talking about incredibly small samples, so we'll need to see those extended. But I'm on the back end of the projections right now with Aaron Jones, which I think is good to look at because it gives you an idea of like, all right, this is the baseline for this player. And I mean, we use win totals really to derive most of these statistics, yards and touchdowns. It all comes from the win totals. If your win total's bad, it's going to be reflected in here. But
Sure.
Jones has a really efficient profile, and I think it would take a pretty severe step back with age for him to underachieve here. We're talking about a guy with a really high target per route run rate, already a focal point in the offense. Of course, there's a chance that changes with Jordan Love, but if anything, I think it might remain consistent because you have like a more passive, less talented player under center. And then we have the split pretty even between Jones and AJ Dillon. Aaron Jones is only projected for about 212 carries right now, not even 1,000 yards rushing. So I think it's still pretty stark to see him rank this high, even though I think we have him projected pretty moderately right now.
And as Felix says, he says, just got here, but the Pack have a great schedule. I mean, that certainly helps Aaron Jones as well. And makes me a little bit wonder if maybe I should be drafting the Packers a little bit more than I have been. I haven't been drafting much of anybody from the Packers, which maybe is a mistake given the soft schedule.
They're really cheap. So, I mean, it's not hard to get them, and you could bump up that exposure quickly. They're all cheap.
True. Except, I mean, Christian Watson goes like ADP of 40 or so. He's a little bit tough.
I don't think I have any of him, actually. I know we'll talk about receivers next week, but he's by far the most expensive.
Yeah. And then Brandon says, I don't know the numbers, but is Madison expected to be very efficient, or is this a volume/offensive bet?
One, it's a bet on his role, and we talked about that a lot. There's no competition here, so he's going to see a voluminous workload. As far as his efficiency goes, I mean, like last year, looking on the back end, his numbers trailed Dalvin Cook by not that much. And if you look at, like targets per route for him, it's actually pretty close to Cook too. And that could speak to, Cook playing through injury at certain points. I think Cook is certainly the more efficient player. But one thing I do think people overrate is the drop off from Cook to Madison. So I don't think the efficiency is quite going to be at the same level, but I also don't think there's going to be this monumental drop off between the two.
Okay. As you can see, I'm updating the sheet a little bit. This is where I got to in my updating stuff, and some of your stuff has changed a little bit, but we're going to get there. Oh, I did that wrong. RB40. In Deontay Foreman, you dropped a little bit, which makes me feel a little bit better about it. We'll get there, but yeah, I think that is good. Yeah, so it's largely just volume based, and as you said, yeah, I've kind of felt like they're a little bit interchangeable. Like Cook's certainly better than Alexander Madison, but not by like a really noticeable amount. Like he's certainly the better running back than Alexander Madison, but as you said, I don't think that it's as big of a gap as people think that it is there. Next up, and I should go back to where I was. You have Miles Sanders, and this is one that you got much closer to the field than you had, Ben, which I don't love because I've drafted a ton of Miles Sanders. You have him ranked as your RB19. The field's draft him as RB20. You have him 56th overall. The field has Miles Sanders 63rd overall. So kind of close the gap a little bit there, but tell me about what you like about Miles Sanders.
He's set up, I think, to handle a pretty sizable workload. We've seen some reports on like Chuba Hubbard recently getting some work, and some other really smart people in the industry have bumped him. So I kind of wanted to be a little more in line with the field. Still semi-aggressive on Miles Sanders, but not just quite as far out ahead in ADP because I'm wrong on these things all the time. And while I do think there's a significant skill gap between Sanders and Hubbard, I'm wrong on these things all the time. So that was mainly to be aggressive on Sanders, but not quite as aggressive, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. And that's, I mean, I'm above weight to the field for sure on Sanders, but I think that's, I'm not taking some crazy stand there either. They've hyped him up. They've hyped him up so much. Like they've talked about like, oh, we want to throw to Miles Sanders more. We want him to be, I think they said that they want him to be a 3-down back. Like, so like everything they're saying about Miles Sanders is like, oh man, they're going to love him in that offense. And you're also high on Bryce Young. So like it does, part of me wants to just go crazy on Miles Sanders, put him down at like, 45th in my rankings and just go crazy on him. But I think also he's got a rookie quarterback. It's his first year in Carolina. I think it's pretty reasonable. Just take like an overweight stance, but not a crazy overweight stance. And it sounds like we're on the same page there.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Dameon Pierce, somebody that I added to this list today. So you've got Dameon Pierce as your RB20. He's going as the RB22 overall, but you've got Dameon Pierce now as your 59th overall in your rankings. The field has him at 70th. What do you like about Dameon Pierce this year?
This offense quietly has a very, very good offensive line. They've invested in that at numerous positions over the years. I think Tunsil's kind of the cornerstone there, but a lot of highly drafted players on this offensive line. You get the quarterback upgrade in CJ Stroud. Their win total's risen to 6.5, which I know doesn't sound like a lot, but we're talking about some pretty stark improvement for the Houston Texans if they reach that mark. And then competition's still severely lacking. You have essentially just a guy, Devin Singletary, behind him, who I think is a fine rusher, but I also don't expect to push Pierce much. Quietly, Pierce had one of the most efficient rookie seasons we've seen in a while. And I think that makes sense when you saw him at Florida, just wildly underutilized by that coaching staff. But every time he got the ball, you were seeing hyper efficient plays from Pierce. Another position where just a little more excited about him than the alternatives. And I think this is an offense that's looking up.
Okay. Oh man, I'm seeing that you dropped your Chase Edmonds stand. That you had such a hard stand on Chase Edmonds. It has come. We'll get there though. We'll talk
We're
about
still
Chase.
way above ADP on him, so we can definitely talk about him.
Okay. Are we? You have Chase Edmonds now at 217 overall.
I mean, his ADP is lower than that.
Interesting. Okay. So next up we have Javonte Williams, which is another one. So as of last week, you had Javonte Williams at 72nd overall. I think the field had him at like 96. This gap has closed quite a bit. And of course, we've got a lot of good news since last week also. So I think that's part of it. Like we've got, he's saying, and there's different interpretations out there on the Javonte Williams situation. And I do think like the skeptical people, like I think that there's some merit to their reading. It's like he said essentially like, yeah, I'm hoping to be ready in a full go by the season. He didn't really come out and say like, I'm ready to go now. And I think there's been different interpretations of how optimistic to be on Javonte Williams, but you've got him as your RB24. The field has him as the RB29. You've got him 81st overall. The field is now drafting him 91st overall. You still like Javonte Williams better than the field. Is it just that he's practicing? You're a little bit more optimistic that he's going to be ready for the start of the season?
Yeah, that's 100% it. And I even like tempered expectations a little bit with him. Right now, we have him projected for 177 carries, exactly the same as Samaje Perine, which I think is a floor here. So you hear this notion on Twitter a lot. All right, guys coming off severe injuries underachieve. I understand that. Then my question to you is, what are you projecting him for? And they're like, oh, I don't think he's going to receive more than 200 touches. It's like, okay, in the back end of our projections, we currently have him at 200 touches, right around there, which I don't think is the ceiling. I think that's more of a floor, assuming he actually starts the year and they ease him back in. And again, this is a team that wants to win football games. Javonte Williams is better than Perine. If it comes down to winning football games, they're not going to put Perine on the field over Williams if he's healthy. But again, at the 200 touch mark, he is still a value in ADP. And then you run into the problem, well, I don't like him. I don't think he's going to play well coming off the injury. It's like, okay, well, you just said he's going to get 200 touches. That has value. And currently where he goes in drafts, it's flat out too low mathematically. So there's a disconnect between people that don't actually do projections, that kind of have these notions and these heuristics they use for drafts. But at the end of the day, you need to quantify something too. So it still just doesn't make sense mathematically.
And also, I mean, Javonte, so I mean, a lot of the time you might expect him to come in a little bit, like not 100% coming in, but like for best ball in particular, it seems like he's more likely to be going strong by the end of the year, right? So if he doesn't start the season, or if he starts slow as he's kind of still recovering, maybe not recovering, but knocking off some rust, he's probably going to have his best weeks, or you'd expect him to have his best weeks, like for the best ball playoffs, right? So that is that a little bit of a, you think that's a boost for Javonte Williams at all?
Yeah, I definitely think that's a feather in the cap for Javonte drafters. And again, this comes down to price. You know, if we were talking about Javonte Williams in the 5th round or something, it'd be like an easy fade. Your argument would make a lot of sense. Not you specifically, Neil.
Yeah.
The people that are the injury bros. But again, this comes down to pricing. We're talking about average draft position in accordance with these players. It's not these players specifically in a vacuum if I think they're going to be fully recovered or not from injuries. Like they do have prices.
Right. Felix asked, and I think this is a good question. I've been getting Zamir White. Who do you think Jacobs could hold out? Do you think that Zamir White is a good handcuff in case Josh Jacobs holds out?
I'm not sure who they would use as the back. They've got a lot of guys there. And I mean, it's kind of New England West. So you have Amir Abdullah, who functions as a pass catcher. Brandon Bolden gets a lot of short yardage. I think White would handle a lot of the between the 20s work, but I'm not sure how much he would get. And I think there's the potential that they kind of go back to the Raiders backfields from 2 or 3 years ago, where it split 3 or 4 ways. I'm not confident in that take, though. I would like to see what happens in camp. Ultimately, I do like White. Pretty high draft pick for them going into his second year. They clearly had optimism last year, but then Jacobs played as well as he did. So that's a camp battle that I'll be watching closely.
Who do you like better between Zamir White and Chase Brown?
Chase Brown.
Interesting. Okay. It's good because I've drafted more of Chase Brown. I'm glad to hear that. But I think those are kind of like interesting, like sort of like similar situations where like people are a little bit unsure of the starting running back if they're going to hold out or get cut or whatever. But then it's also kind of unclear who the backup is going to be. But all right, so Chase Brown for you, I think it's Chase Brown for me as well. All right, Jerick McKinnon. So you have, and this is another one that I think that I added to this list this week because I think maybe you rose on Jerick McKinnon a little bit. You have him as your RB 35, 111 overall. The field drafted him as the RB 43, 128 overall. And it sounds like this week in particular, I think that there was some news that Isaiah Pacheco might be a little bit banged up. Like there's some chance that he might not even be ready to start the season. Maybe I'm reading too much into the news we've gotten on Isaiah Pacheco, but does that factor in for you at all, or do you just like Jerick McKinnon based on his role from last year anyway?
Yeah, I didn't change any projections based on that Pacheco news. We'll wait and see how severe it is, but I think it's a little overblown right now. Anyway, what really changed in this backfield from last year to this year, where McKinnon's now going so low? He's a year older, but I'm just confused. What else changed for him to be ranked so low as the pass catching back on the best offense in football?
All right, so I think the concern might be, and maybe maybe I need to look at the actual late season stats, but it's at least my impression. I think a lot of people have this impression that McKinnon towards the end of the year, so we had like several weeks in a row where he was just like scoring touchdowns, receiving touchdowns over and over, and then the last couple weeks, maybe during the playoffs, they stopped featuring him quite as much, and he wasn't as involved. And maybe there's some concern that like the Chiefs have kind of decided to stop using him as much as they had been for that stretch, which seems kind of bizarre given all the success they were having with him later in the season, that they would kind of pull that rug. But do you see any concern that like his role seemed to have diminished at least a little bit in like the last few weeks? And maybe I should be looking at the stats on Jerick McKinnon there. But I got the impression that the role kind of diminished a little bit late in the season. Do you think but you're expecting him to have kind of like his average from last year, like his average score? Do you think that's something we can kind of expect this year? Like he's going to have some boom weeks, some bust weeks, and in the end, it's going to average out to be about the same as we had him this year?
Probably not the same, but he comes in projected where he is with 84 carries and 55 targets. So, I mean, we're not aggressive on his projection, and he's still this high. Really good floor with the pass catching for McKinnon. Tons of upside if Pacheco's injured. Clyde Edwards-Hilaire's in the doghouse. I mean, this just doesn't make sense.
You say 84 carries and 55 targets?
Yes.
And last year he had 72 carries and 71 targets. So you have, the targets a little bit less than last year, but the carries a little bit more. So it seems to be kind of similar volume to what we saw last year. And he was certainly a good pick last year. Yeah, it looks like, and I've been drafting a good amount on McKinnon as well. He feels like he's got both like a solid floor and ceiling combo for me. Like I don't see McKinnon being completely like not used in this Kansas City offense. Do you have any concern that the Chiefs are going to sign one of these unsigned backs? I saw somebody on Twitter kind of speculating that maybe they're going to sign one of the like Zeke, Fournette, Kareem Hunt, one of those types. Do you have any concern there, or do you think that they're set as far as running backs go?
If they do, that would be bad for Pacheco. If Pacheco's healthy, I don't see why they would.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's not something that I had really considered either. Like, it doesn't seem like they need any of these other running backs who they have are serviceable in that offense, but something to think about. All right, so this next one is the one where you and I are the furthest apart, and you and ADP are also furthest apart. I wrote an article, I did a video on running backs I don't like at their ADP, and actually I think Raheem Mostert is his ADP has dropped a little bit since then, but he's one that I was like, he's just going too high. I would rather take that that chance on Jeff Wilson. Like I think that they're so similar, and it doesn't seem to make sense to me that Raheem Mostert is going 20, 25 spots ahead of Jeff Wilson. Seems like you have the opposite viewpoint here. You like Raheem Mostert quite a bit better than I do. You have him as your RB40. The field has him as the RB54. You have Raheem Mostert 125th overall. The field has him at 173. Talk me into some Raheem Mostert here.
He's played ahead of Jeff Wilson at every point in his career. So it's really just that. And I didn't realize we were so aggressive on Raheem Mostert.
Yeah, it's fairly aggressive. So to me, my concern is like not just that Jeff Wilson, but then like they brought in the rookie Devin Achane. Now there's some concern about Dalvin Cook signing, which I don't know if that's something you can really you can't really project for. Like, are they going to sign a new running back? Are you thinking that this is maybe a little bit too aggressive on Raheem Mostert? Like, it sounds like you're surprised by it. Are you concerned with it? Or would you rather be a little bit closer to the field, or are you comfortable being draft him well ahead of where the field has him?
I'm comfortable being ahead of 170. I mean, that's absurd. I'm looking at the projections. We have been projected for 145 touches, roughly, like right in the same range as Jeff Wilson and Achane. Like, there's not a lot separating them. And I know I think, a little ahead of ADP on Achane, a little bit. We're certainly ahead of ADP on Mostert. And I don't know I don't have the Wilson numbers in front of me, but I mean,
Okay.
Are people just under projecting Miami as a whole? Like, this team's going to run the ball this year.
You're expecting them to run the ball. So it might be just that the field is not expecting Miami to run the ball a ton. For me, the concern is just that they do have that three-headed back. I mean, so you have Achane at 119 overall. Let me see where he is in the ADP. So Achane going, you have Achane right with the field. So the field, you have at 119, ADP of 118. Mostert is the one where I think you have the biggest difference. You have Mostert at 125. The field has Mostert at 173. And then Jeff Wilson is being drafted at 187. And you have Jeff Wilson at 182. So you're kind of right with the field on both Jeff Wilson and Devin Achane. You're just well ahead of the field on Raheem Mostert. So do you think it's just that you're expecting Miami to run the ball more than the field does, and maybe you're expecting Mostert to take on, more of a bell cow role than most of us are expecting?
I don't think so. I have their pass rate like almost right where it was last year, which is really high. And I have all three running backs projected almost evenly. So I think the field's just too low on Miami's running attack entirely. Like, mathematically, it doesn't add up. You shouldn't have, if you're expecting an even three-way timeshare, you shouldn't have two running backs outside the top 170 and one like at 115 or whatever you said the ADP for Achane is. The backfield as a whole, I would say, is too cheap. Jeff Wilson included.
Yeah, it's interesting. So
I mean, like you could. This is a price thing. Like, Raheem Mostert's not a fade to me because he's pick 170. Like, what are you really giving up to get him?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose at 170 he might be a fair. I think that it also might be a little bit of injury concern with Mostert, that people just, and he did play 16 games last year, but he only played one game in 2021, 8 games in 2020, 9 games in 2018. So I think there might be just a little bit of concern with Mostert, just that he's kind of struggled to stay on the field throughout his career, and now he's in this kind of three-headed monster. Plus the Dalvin Cook, I think, has been a little bit, maybe drives down his ADP somewhat. But it sounds like you're comfortable, so obviously you don't need to take him at 125. So I don't think you're ever drafting Raheem Mostert at 125 anyway. Where do you think you would be targeting him in these drafts, given that he has the ADP much lower than you have him ranked? Where do you think that you would start targeting him? Because you obviously will want to draft him given where his ADP is. I think you're going to start targeting him around like pick 150, because you can probably get him there pretty consistently, or are you just going to try to get him closer to where his ADP is?
Yeah, I mean, I never want to take a guy at 120 when you can get him at 170. So as close to the ADP as possible.
Okay. But obviously, like, because you like him better than his ADP, like, you're going to want to have more than even exposure to him. So probably you're going to want to, take him a little bit ahead of his ADP, given how far you have him ranked ahead of ADP. Because, like, is he something that you think you'd want to have in 30% of your best ball lineups? If you did 150 best ball mania for drafts, do you think you would want to have 30+% of Raheem Mostert, where 8.3% is like you're right in line with the field?
Probably not that high.
Okay.
But yeah, definitely over the field for sure. And I mean, I'm over the field on all three of these backs. So I think just naturally, the ones where I have A chain, like I'm not taking Mostert, so it kind of evens out. I'm not sure why people are so low on the Miami backfield, man. Do we think this offense is going to be bad now?
So to me, I guess I'm kind of low on this Miami offense. So I can give you kind of my reason is just that we have, it's a three-headed monster. Injury concerns with both of the older backs. I don't think that A Chain really has the upside to be like a lead back. I think that A Chain is more like he's going to be maybe a third down roll back. Like I don't think he has the upside to be a bell cow and kind of around those spots. I think I'm generally drafting other positions or players that I think have a little bit more of like bell cow upside. So like for me, A Chain is one that I'm like, yeah, I just can't really see the upside, like on where he's going to pick 119. I don't see him being a top, ending up as like a top 50 player or something. And I guess not many are that you're drafting around him, but I don't think that A Chain is likely to be end up with like a top 80 value or something like that, which is kind of what I'm hoping for is players who are going to have at least the upside to do better than where you are drafting them by a significant amount. Raheem Mostert, I think I said that he's somebody that I don't want to draft. And for me, I think it's really just that I don't see a huge difference between Mostert and Wilson. And you're right, like Mostert has played ahead of him, like he has been the starter, but like he hasn't, like when they have both been like on in games together, like neither of them is hurt, he hasn't been taking that many more snaps than Jeff Wilson. Jeff Wilson also younger, so I think part of it for me is like of the three of them, I've drafted the most of Jeff Wilson. So I've been like I'm underweight. I think I'm both A Chain and Mostert. To me, Jeff Wilson is like he's got a little bit more upside. He's only 27, whereas Jeff Wilson's like 27. Mostert is I believe 31 right now. So there's a little bit of that like age cliff for a running back. He's kind of at that point. He's had some injuries already, so I'm a little bit more uncertain there. I think part of it for me is just like I'd rather wait and take Jeff Wilson 20 picks later if those are my options. But do you think that Mostert is like you're expecting either significantly more volume, or do you think that he's more efficient than Jeff Wilson?
I haven't projected relatively even in volume, slight tier break. So again, yeah, it's basically 1, 2, 3, almost the same volume. He has been more efficient than Jeff Wilson. That is not up for debate. Whether that changes because of the age curve or not, we will see. But at the end of the day, I mean, for these three backs to be going outside the top 100 is a little surprising. Miami is a 9.5 win total. I can see the argument for thinking that none of them can emerge as like the pure workhorse back. But at some point, being a rotational back in Miami is worth something. And a pick 170 to me, that's something that's worth taking.
And obviously, like they do have like one of them can emerge. Like to me, I don't think that A Chain and I don't watch college football, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. But just like the way he plays, like I don't think that he is the type of back who is likely to take over as a bell cow back. Whereas I think either Jeff Wilson or Raheem Mostert, if the other one of those two is out, could be like a 3-down back. Do you think that that's a possibility that like one of those two, if the other one for misses time for whatever reason, do you see either of them? Like one of them could certainly be a top 100 player. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Which obviously you like them, or you like Mostert better than I do. Yeah, maybe it's just it's hard to see how it's going to go with the three running backs. It's hard for most of us to sort of project the backfield to know exactly what to expect there. But yeah, I think I've started drafting Mostert a little bit more after seeing how much you like him. It's hard for me because I'm like, well, I already planted my flag.
These aren't player takes. Like I don't like him. I just projected them for like the same workload. And if you do that, you end up with Mostert way ahead of ADP.
Yeah, but like that's like a reason for me to think I should probably draft some more Mostert. Like even if it's not a player take, the fact that he projects that well for you makes me think, all right, I should probably not be full fading, which is hard for me after I already planted my flag as anti Mostert and pro Jeff Wilson. It's hard for me to then say, well, maybe I should.
I don't think that's a bad take because Wilson's extremely cheap too. Like you're kind of doing the Patriots thing where we don't always know who's going to get the work. We just take the cheapest one.
Which is also what I've always done with the Chiefs, and it typically works out. Like just last year, I took a ton of McKinnon. I took a ton of Pacheco when he was going in the 18th round, and I drafted very little CEH. And now this year, I'm sort of reversing it with the Chiefs. Similar backfield there. It's just like I'm just going to take the value and hope that it works out for me. But yeah, it's kind of hard to project a little bit. All right. I think we've talked. I mean, it's kind of an important talking point there because you do have Mostert so high relative to the field, but we can move on. Deontay Foreman, you have as your RB47. And now I think this gap is also closed a little bit here too. But Deontay Foreman, you have as the RB47. The field has as the RB51. You have him 153 overall. The field has him 166 overall. How are you feeling about Deontay Foreman?
Yeah, I just got some positives from Roshan. So bumped Roshan,
Okay.
brought Foreman down a little bit. So that was it.
All right, and I have Roshan in your fades list, so maybe he's not going to be there once I look at this.
That was
again.
He might be still a little lower, but yeah, that bumped Roshan, brought Foreman down.
All right, so we have, and I think that we need to talk about Chase Edmonds here because I think that you actually are like right in line with ADP at this point, whereas you were fairly high last week. But let's take a look at it. So we have Deontay Foreman as your RB47. So you have him. Let's see, 47. 51, 52, 53, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70. I mean, I'm not even going to count you all, but you've dropped Chase Edmonds. Oh, did I miss him? I might have missed Chase Edmonds on there, but you have dropped him so you have him 217 overall now. Last week you had Chase Edmonds at 152 overall, so it's he's clearly not your RB47 anymore. He's like RB70 for you. He's
RB64.
Oh, RB64. So I guess in terms of ADP, you're similar. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, like we're looking at ADP's tough. Like you could say he's 217 in our rankings, but like there's probably like 300 players that have an ADP of like 206 because they don't always get drafted in drafts and stuff. So it's tough to look at that because like the 250th player might actually have an ADP of like 217. So once you get down here, I would look more at like RB64 versus an underdog. He's like RB70 or something, if that makes sense, because the ADPs do not actually give you an accurate picture.
Okay. So do you think that you do like Chase Edmonds better than where he's going in drafts generally? Like, tell me, do you think Chase Edmonds is a good like last round pick? Is he something that you want to be above weight to the field on as like a last round flyer?
Yeah, I mean, we're still way above ADP. So again, he's ranked 217 and then his ADP is 215. But if you actually dive into the running back rankings, he's RB64 for us and RB79 on Underdog.
True.
So again, this is just the trick that late round ADPs will play on you if you use those exclusively to evaluate. So we're still theoretically way above market on Chase Edmonds. This comes down to Tampa Bay not having an NFL backfield, really. You have Rachaad White and nothing behind him. Chase Edmonds is the most proven commodity there. And he also occupies a role that they don't really have anywhere else. If Rachaad White goes down or something like that, they don't have another pass catching back. Keyshawn Vaughn can't do it. So Edmonds should be set up as the change of pace, handcuff type back here. Unless they sign someone, it's the thinnest backfield in the NFL.
Do you think it does seem like a spot where they should sign someone, right? Like because they only have Rachaad White and Chase Edmonds, like it seems like a prime spot for. I think that when Leonard Fournette got cut, there were some rumors that he maybe was just going to like restructure or something. They were going to re-sign him, but obviously
it's also kind of like, what's the point? Because this team sucks. Like they're not winning any games whether they sign Fournette or not. So I mean, it's kind of like what Miami did all those years when they had like Salvin Ahmed handling the ball. It's like, yeah, you could go out and sign a vet, but does that actually help you win games? And the answer is almost certainly no.
Yeah. No 11 says best articles to read before getting ready for a best ball draft. Matt, have you written any? Do you have a favorite article that you've written, or have you been writing articles or just doing AV content?
Yeah, I read about 3 articles a week, and
that's right. I've read them.
They're all like pretty specific into certain players. I don't think there's one article I would specifically point you to. But if you just scroll through the content on our site, I think it'll give you a pretty good idea. And Olafi's doing some good work too.
Yeah.
So check out his videos. There's a lot of good content out there. Maybe we should write like a manifesto or something.
Yeah, we probably
should. An intro, or you know what I mean?
Noah, tell me what you would be interested in. Like, are you new to best ball? Because we have been looking for like what new content we should do. If you guys have idea for different types of content that you would like to see, we're always, interested in hearing your thoughts. Like if you're just looking for like player takes, or if you're looking for like best ball for beginners kind of stuff, we're always looking for new content, new things to do. I'm loving doing these rankings shows. This is actually, I think, my new favorite show to do, is just talking about the rankings. Live drafts are always fun too, because you kind of get into strategy, but here you can really dive deep into specific player takes, which is kind of cool. But yeah, let me know if you have specific stuff you're looking for. If I know of any articles, I'll send them your way, or else we'll get on it. We'll have somebody write something up, because we are looking for new types of content. All right, so we talked about some of the players that you love here. Now let's talk about some of your fades, and of course I need to kind of update some of these. So Jonathan Taylor, you had as your RB10. I should check if that is still true. I guess you have that open, right? Is he still your RB10?
Yes.
All right, and you have him. You had him 27th overall. You have Jonathan Taylor 28th overall. Now the field is drafting Jonathan Taylor as the RB5, and I think that I don't think much has changed for Jonathan Taylor. Yeah, he's going as the RB5, and he is going 18th overall. So you're a little bit low on Jonathan Taylor relative to the field. I know it's all ranking. It's all based on your projections here, but why do you think that you're projecting Jonathan Taylor worse than the field?
Yeah, first of all, it's just a little more secure to take receivers at this point, and that position has more scarcity. So you could take Jonathan Taylor here and forego an elite receiver. So you end up with something like Jonathan Taylor and Mike Williams, or you take an elite receiver and then you can still get Joe Mixon later. So maybe you end up with like Garrett Wilson and Joe Mixon. So I think the 2v2 you play in this game looks a little bit better if you go receiver early in this spot. And then from there, if you look at the running backs individually, Derrick Henry should be above Jonathan Taylor. If he's not, I would question how you're doing projections. Even looking at sports books across the industry, Derrick Henry is widely projected as the league leader in rushing on the ground. Henry also saw career highs in receiving last year, which I think is noteworthy, because Taylor doesn't exactly have the best receiving profile either. And both of these offenses are comparable. They're going to be, both of them should be in the top 3 in run rate, especially in situation neutral. Atlanta will give these two a run for their money. But we're talking about two purely run-heavy offenses, not much pass game work for either guy. And then it seems to be not just my projections, but projections across the industry that have have Henry higher. So the ADP there doesn't make much sense. Saquon Barkley, this is a holdout thing. He should be above Taylor if he doesn't hold out. Workload's way better. Pollard, if they don't sign another back, which it looks less and less likely that they will, way better workload than Taylor, should be higher. And even Ramondre, there's not a lot of differences between New England and Indianapolis right now. They're two really bad offenses, and then you have one guy that catches passes and one guy that doesn't. So Taylor, I think, just mathematically should be slotted in behind some of the backs he's drafted behind. And furthermore, the receiving options are very good in this range too.
Yep, I think that makes sense. And I have not drafted a ton of Jonathan Taylor, I think, for all of the reasons that you mentioned. Now, another spot where you are drafting well below the field is Travis Etienne, and I'm updating some of this stuff, but Travis Etienne, you have ranked 52nd overall. Travis Etienne is going 41st overall. So you're pretty far behind the field on Etienne. Tell me about why you don't like Etienne as much as the field.
Yeah, Mixon's behind him. Mixon has a better role and a better offense. So that mathematically doesn't make much sense. ETN, I think, ran really bad last year in terms of touchdowns. He was a horrific pass catcher, which is something he kind of displayed in college. They kind of just force fed him the ball, even though it wasn't like a strong suit for him.
Yeah.
But they signed Tank Bigsby, and they've been very vocal about Tank Bigsby having a role. So do we see ETN with the same volume that he had last year? Because right now I think we're drafting him towards the ceiling in terms of volume, whereas there is some risk on the down end for him.
Okay. Yeah, he's another player that I'm always taking a wide receiver or like Lamar Jackson at the spot where I can get ETN. So he's another one that I have not drafted a ton of. And then both Detroit backs, you're a little bit lower than the field on both Detroit backs, or I should say you have them ranked lower than the field. You have Jahmyr Gibbs 54th overall. He is going 40th overall. And then let's talk about both backs at the same time. So you have Jahmyr Gibbs 54th. He's going 40th overall. And then David Montgomery is being drafted, let me find it, 79th overall by the field. You have David Montgomery as pretty far down here. 103rd. So you're drafting both of them behind the field. What is your take on these Detroit running backs? And as I recall, you're also low on Jared Goff. So is it just not a belief in this Detroit offense?
No, it's not that, because these come from win totals. The projections have nothing to do with my beliefs. This is the anti-Miami Dolphins situation where how do both of these backs score this many points with the Lions projected for 9.5 wins? That's great. It's a winning season for them. But I mean, there's only so many carries and targets to go around. So how does David Montgomery pay off like a top 80 ADP and Jahmyr Gibbs pays off a top 40? Like, someone on the back end run the projections and get those numbers for me, because mathematically it doesn't add up. You need an injury to one or the other for this to pay off, or you just need like one to beat out the other. And then in that case, one of them is significantly underperforming. So I'd be a little more willing to take Gibbs just based on what they invested in him, and he's going to be catching the passes. But I don't know how people on the back end get these numbers to make sense.
And a lot of people drafting best ball might not be doing stuff on the back end. It might just be drafting like, and it might be that people are just taking one or the other. They have the splits a little bit differently. I've seen some buzz on Twitter about like potentially like drafting both of them, which I don't think that I could see with given where they're going. It sounds like would you be hesitant to draft both Detroit running backs in the same lineup?
For sure, I'm hesitant to draft handcuffs on any team, but you have to spend a top 100 pick on both these guys.
Right. Yeah. So probably not something that I'm too interested in doing either. J.K. Dobbins, I think this is one that you kind of have flipped, and the only reason I really put this one in here, I think, is that you have J.K. Dobbins and Dameon Pierce essentially flipped on the field here. You have J.K. Dobbins 65th overall. He's being drafted 57th overall. Do you have any strong takes on J.K. Dobbins? I mean, that's not that big of a gap.
Not really. Think you might see Baltimore pass a little bit more with the new OC and the investments they made in receiver, but nothing too crazy here to talk about.
All right, then let's jump down to James Cook, where the field has drafted him 94th overall. You have him ranked 118th overall. I've seen he's a pretty polarizing player. Like, some people are like, James Cook is essentially, I've seen the take that James Cook is essentially Jahmyr Gibbs, but going way later. I think that was just today. Maybe it was Debro. I can't remember who put that out there. But somebody was very high on James Cook on Twitter today. You are well below field in where you have him ranked. Would you not want to draft James Cook as a top 100 pick?
No, I wouldn't. And I think I'm probably a little higher than the field on Damian Harris, who came over in free agency. But I disagree on he's Jahmyr Gibbs. He's lighter than Jahmyr Gibbs. So if you go back and run any studies on running backs, you're going to find that there's like weight thresholds for players to actually handle full 3-down workloads. Cooks doesn't meet any of those thresholds at 190 pounds. And they signed the perfect complement in Damian Harris, just raw, pure grinder here. So honestly, your take on the Miami situation, I kind of think, is what we have in Buffalo. Without an injury, like, how does James Cook achieve his ceiling? And even if Damian Harris goes down, does James Cook walk into a 3-down workload? I'm not sure about that at 190 pounds. I don't think it would be wise for Buffalo to take that approach, and I don't think they will here either. They also have Latavius Murray on the roster, who's more of a handcuff to Damian Harris. But in the event of a Damian Harris injury, I don't personally believe it's James Cook going out there for 25 touches a game.
Do you have any concern? So it sounds like you sort of like Damian Harris, and I should check out where you have Damian Harris. I don't have, so you have him 114th overall, which isn't crazy different from where the field has Damian Harris. Where is he? I don't think that he's far off there, but would you have any concern when drafting Damian Harris? Do you have any worries about Latavius Murray eating into him without like any kind of injury?
Not really, but I don't know. You never know. That's a camp thing.
Yeah, he's going 116th overall, so you're kind of right with the field on Damian Harris, and he's somebody that I have been drafting, I think, a good amount of in general. I think I'm probably I have more than my 8.3% of Damian Harris, and I think I'm probably below weight to the field on James Cook. So I've been kind of taking that stance of like Damian Harris seems like the guy who's more likely to score touchdowns and take on more of a bell cow role, but yeah, it's James Cook. He's similar to, as you said, kind of similar to that Miami situation where it's just like, I don't really think he's going to be bell cow. He did rush for like 5.7 yards per carry or something ridiculous last year. So maybe he doesn't need the bell cow role to get there. But I have not drafted a ton of Damian Harris, but not trying to be honestly too different from the field there. It's a tough spot to really see a ton of upside, but where he's going maybe a little bit. Zach Charbonnet, you have 128th overall. The field has him at 100 now. He's all the way up to pick or 101 at this point. He's been rising in the ranks a little bit. How are you feeling about Zach Charbonnet?
I think he's fine. I just think people are a little aggressive on him. This is similar to the Detroit situation where it's like, all right, you're going to be really aggressive with Kenneth Walker. How can you be really aggressive with Charbonnet too? So I mean, there's only so many carries to go around, and I think people are getting a little lost in draft capital that don't do projections. Like, you need to divide these backfields up to some degree, and even if you want to play the game, the upside game, then you should be moving projections down on either Charbonnet if you think Walker is going to overachieve, or if you think Charbonnet is going to carve out more from Walker, then you need to bump Walker down. There's just some incongruencies in drafts right now where it's like, all right, both Detroit running backs can't pay off these ADPs, and this isn't quite as severe, but you are still seeing a gap here between Walker and Charbonnet, which doesn't make a lot of sense with them both having such high ADPs. Now, you can always make the case it's an upside thing. If Walker goes down, Charbonnet is better than the alternatives in terms of maybe his feature back potential.
Yeah.
But from a projection standpoint, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So I think we'll probably be near ADP, but slightly below as the season goes on with Charbonnet, because you're really betting on a Walker injury. The standalone is there, but I don't think it's quite as good as where people are drafting him.
Okay. But
and in this range, you kind of need a standalone. He's not a pure handcuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of what standalone. I mean, I guess Javonte Williams at this point he's risen enough. These 10 points higher. Can you think of any standalones you can really get though at around pick 100? Like that's the hard part, is that it's just like there's not that many like easy clicks. I really hate, like, in general, around pick 100. It's so tough for me. It's hard for me to find anybody that I really love in that range. I guess you've got yeah, I mean, it's a lot of running backs who aren't really like pure RB1s in this range, right? Like, I guess I know you like Rachaad White a little bit.
Love Rachaad White. He's going way ahead of this, though.
Yeah, he's going. He's actually been rising in the ranks a little bit. So you're close to the
We've
field
been
now,
ahead the whole time. Let's go.
Yeah, you've been. It's another the field trying to catch up with you a little bit.
I don't think it's just me, man.
Well, yeah, sure. But yeah, it's a lot of like, you got both Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson around pick 100. Just like not a ton of real feature backs there. So for me, it's generally been like I kind of start targeting other positions around pick 100 just because I don't really see any feature backs that I love, and I'd rather target players later.
Yeah, by standalone, I don't mean feature back. I mean there's a projectable role in the offense. Okay. Charbonnet doesn't have that right now. He could, you're guessing, but we'll see what his role is. But there are projectable roles. Khalil Herbert has a projectable role. I think Mostert has a projectable role. Even James Cook and Damian Harris have projectable roles. You might just be eating 5 carries a game with Charbonnet. I don't think it's going to be that bad, but his role's a lot harder to project.
Okay, so you think that it could be like really he's just not all that involved, which yeah,
I mean, Seattle does the weirdest things at running back, man. There's a wider range of outcomes.
Okay, so there's at least some potential for 10, 12 carries a game, even without Kenneth Walker injury. Do you think?
If you do that, then you should not be drafting Kenneth Walker. If you think that, though,
right? Yeah, it's a little bit it's tough. I mean, it's always tough to project that kind of situation, like where it kind of didn't really make sense as a draft pick because Kenneth Walker seemed like he was really good last year, so it doesn't really make sense. But yeah, I guess we'll probably get more information as the offseason goes.
Yeah. Seattle's backfield's being drafted as if they run the ball 50 times a game, and more realistically, it's going to be around 30.
Right. And they just added JSN. It's like, man, that's a team that you'd think should be throwing more. But all right. Tank Bigsby, another one that you're a little bit below it to the field. You've got ranking him a little bit lower. You have him 154th overall. The field has Tank Bigsby 142nd overall. And you also were a little bit light on Travis Etienne. So what is there that you're not loving in the Jacksonville running back situation?
Yeah, I think this is just like as you get lower in the ADP ranks, the gaps between like the actual positional value and the ADPs aren't quite the same. Like what is Tank Bigsby going RB wise? So like you mentioned the ADP difference. He's RB 46 on Underdog. He's RB 48 for us.
Okay.
So it's just like you have more volatility in the picks back there. So I don't think like the ADP versus the ranking difference is actually quite as sharp as it is at the top. I think this is more or less like look at the positional rankings and you'll see the true gaps down here. So I don't think we're wildly different on Bigsby.
Okay. Kendra Miller is one that there's a little bit of a difference there, and it's a tough situation to read. Now we have Alvin Kamara. Sounds like he's pled guilty. So now there's probably a suspension looming, but sort of hard to know. Are you projecting for any kind of suspension for Alvin Kamara?
Yes.
Like 4 games? What are you expecting there?
It's basically like 4.5 games. A lot of people are saying 3 to 6, so I split the difference.
Okay.
So
makes sense.
We'll see on that, and we'll get that ironed out to a T when we get the actual suspension. But it seems like he could get anywhere from 3 to 6, so just middling that basically.
Okay. And Kendra Miller. So even with that, you have Kendra Miller ranked 165th overall, the field taking him 138th overall. Are you expecting Jamal Williams to like kind of be the featured back coming in?
Not really. We have Jamal Williams at RB 43 and Kendra Miller at RB 50. So these New Orleans running backs are being drafted pretty aggressively. Considering the suspension looks like it's going to be short for Kamara. So, like, we have Jamal Williams, what was RB 43? He's going RB 42. We have Kendra Miller, RB 50. He's going, what, RB 45? We're not drastically different there. And we have Kamara a little ahead of ADP, if I'm not mistaken, which makes sense because you look at the back end, like, Kamara's not just dead now. He's going to play the other games this year, and he is going to be the preferred pass catcher and likely the preferred runner. I know they don't love using him in that capacity, but like we have him projected for 158 carries. We have him projected for 52 targets. Both of those are well below where he generally is. We're pretty modest on Kamara, and you still don't get great projections on Jamal Williams and Kendra Miller. So a little surprised those guys are going so high.
Yeah, and there was some one of the Saints like beat reporters. Somebody asked what to expect from the backfield, and he basically said, if Kendra Miller starts the season hot, ... was his response, something like that, kind of indicating that there was some chance of Kendra Miller taking over as the featured back in New Orleans. Do you think there's any chance that Kendra Miller holds on to a significant role holds on to the RB1 role for the Saints after Kamara comes back?
I don't know why they would do that. Alternatives to use.
It does seem fairly unlikely, but I think he sort of indicated that's at least something that could happen. Like if he looks really good early in the year, maybe Kamara doesn't take back the role, but I don't know. It's not something that I'm certainly expecting there. Roschon Johnson. So it sounds like you like Roschon better than you did a couple weeks ago. You've got him at 173 overall. You're still below the field. The field has him ranked 152nd overall. Give me your take on the Chicago backfield situation. Is there who do you like? Who do you not like there?
Yeah, I think it's going to be Khalil Herbert leading it, with Foreman handling a change of pace on early downs and Roschon potentially handling a change of pace on third downs. He's a pass catching back, and that's about it.
All right. So no strong take there. You're fine with where the field is taking Roschon Johnson at 152nd overall. You just have him, at that point you have his rank a little bit lower than ADP. And then finally, Tyler Algier, you have him ranked 171st overall, the field taking Algier 146th overall. Another tough spot to really gauge, because they seemed like they were in a good spot with Algier last year. Like they got this back really cheap and he was really efficient last year. And then they went out and got Bijan early anyway. What are you expecting from Algier this year?
I'm guessing people are just bumping him up based on handcuff equity.
Yep.
They still have Cordell Patterson, so it's not like clearly Algier's job. Patterson banged up a little bit last year. But yeah, I think they're probably a little too high on him. But the upside's certainly there with Algier. You need a Bijan injury for sure. You have no standalone, but the handcuff equity is high.
Yeah, for sure high there. So Lundar says, Felix, I like Zamir White due to the sheer number of touches Jacobs got last year. Like, I think that's obviously like handcuff only, or do you think Zamir White has any standalone value without an injury to Josh Jacobs?
I do not.
Yeah, it seems like Josh Jacobs was just so good last year. They have no reason to not give him the same volume this year if he is healthy. But yeah, if he does go down, like it's possible that Zamir White just becomes the dude there, and he'd obviously look really good as an 18th round value there. Matt, any other comments on any other running backs that we didn't talk about here? Obviously, I wasn't able to finish my fades list here. Wasn't able to re-go over. As you know, I've been dealing with a sick dog all day. I can hear him outside my door right now, jingling out there, waiting for me out there. So it's I've had a little bit of struggle to update this stuff before the show today. But anybody that you think you're far from the field on that you want to talk about?
Not really. I'll let you get back to your sick dog in a second. There's a couple of players I think will rise throughout the process, not just the free agent backs. If they sign, they should rise as well. But I'll give you three quickly. Two of them are on the same team. One's Pierre Strong, still kind of in the wake of that. Who did they cut? James Robinson. But
right.
Now he's positioned as the handcuff. Theoretically, I think he's ahead of Kevin Harris. Should see him rising. So I've been a little aggressive on Pierre Strong.
Yep.
And then I've also been aggressive on the backup Chargers running back. We just don't know who it's going to be between Josh Kelly and Isaiah Spiller. But Austin Eckler is not going to handle a future back workload. He doesn't need it to still be a top 3 running back. So no slight to Eckler. But someone's going to handle carries behind him, or I guess I should say in addition to him. I like gambling on the backup Chargers running back. You can get them in the last round of every single draft. So I've kind of just been alternating between them. Hopefully some of those teams can hit some gold.
Interesting. Maybe I need to start drafting more of Joshua Kelly.
Like I would rather have those Chargers backs than the backup Vikings backs. They have better standalone value, and I think they're better players. They're at least higher draft picks than everyone on Minnesota, and they're also cheaper. So I mean, there's a lot of things to like about them.
Yeah, interesting. That's I think I've drafted a little bit of Joshua Kelly. I've not drafted a single share of Isaiah Spiller. I know that for sure. Maybe I need to start working him in there just in case he becomes the guy there, and in case of an injury or something to Eckler. Eckler also has said that he, doesn't sound like he's thrilled to be back in Los Angeles this year. Is that do you think there's any chance like he's not going to hold out, is he?
No, I believe he got an extension, but he also doesn't carry the ball a lot. Like
right.
He carries the ball about 150 to 200 times a year. That leaves a lot of meat on the bone for whoever their change of pace is. Like this is a standalone, not standalone in terms of they're going to have a role. It's not a feature back role, but someone in the 18th round is going to get carries for LA, and we just don't know who it is, but it's likely to be one of those two backs.
All right. I see you have Clyde Edwards-Helaire. You have him unranked, I think, or you have him projected for 24 fantasy points. Is he just somebody who's not really on your radar? You're not a believer in a CEH renaissance this year?
No.
All right. He's someone that I've been drafting kind of a bit as a late round flyer just because of the offense. Like, well, if he does have some kind of a role this year, he's obviously in as good a spot as a running back can be in. But they kind of went away from him last year. So maybe I'm expecting too much from CEH, hoping for too much. Let me see if there's anybody else here who's really standing out to me. Chuba Hubbard looks like you're not too far off from the field. He's somebody I've drafted a good amount of.
Bumped him after the reports that could have a role.
Okay. Let me see. Is there anybody else here who's there? I don't know if there's anybody else who's really standing out too much. I think we kind of covered all of the real outliers for you versus what the field is doing here.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. All right. Good. All right. Well, I think that was a productive talk. Yeah, I'm gonna go take care of my dog. Yeah, no real surprise here. All right. I kept on thinking that I was finding somebody, but nobody really standing out. All right. I will get back to my dog. Matt, do you have any final words for the people?
Thank you guys for listening to the show. I know we get pretty in the weeds with these rankings, so very much appreciated, and good luck to you all. It's the best time of year to be drafting. Slow time for sports, but best balls, they're keeping us moving through it, so I'm happy about that too. Thanks everyone for being here.
Yeah, and Matt and I will do a wide receiver show next week. That'll be a good one as well. Thanks for watching, guys. And reminder, you can, if you get this, use the link in the description. You're not only going to get your first deposit matched up to $100, you will also get a free month of Stochastic Plus Platinum. We will email you with that offer after the fact. So fantastic deal. If you haven't yet signed up for Underdog, use the link in the description of this video. Thank you guys very much for watching, and we'll catch you next week.